How can I look at what's happening and also still feel my joy? How can I look at what's happening and, as you so beautifully put, have my sense of humor, which is how can I have the eyes of what? Source, you could say, the eyes of joy, love, beauty, the greater perspective while also honoring what is. It's being able to hold that and not just hold that in a human way, as in, of course, I'm this age, right? Teenagers get really upset when you say it's just a phase because they're in it and it means everything to them. But as an adult, you know it's just a phase because you've been through it. So how do you honor the phase that they're in, but also hold the perspective that you know it's just a phase? And that comes through
Let's talk shift.
okay. We are Halae.
Hello, Halae.
Hello.
So excited to have you here.
Yes, and well-timed, in the flow. We're giving Alora a moment to adjust because you, Moon, have your audience and you have your soul and you have your intent, which is very strong and very clear. And so we are a group of non-physical friends, you could say guides, but we don't want to take it too seriously. Like, you have to listen to everything that we're saying and we're guiding everything. But we are what we have told Alora is like an MC. So we host this channel and there are a group of us, all of us, per Alora's, we jokingly say demands before she incarnated, was we all have to have human earth experience. So all of us have had earth experience, but we also bring in special guests, and some of those may not have had earth experiences. And so this Halae that we are is us, but we also have special guests that have come to add to our energy because of you, Moon, and your audience and your intent. So we know that you would like to discuss about what's happening in this spiritual awakening of the world. We call it the emerging world, and other folks call it different things. And we're going to begin by saying this. Yes, there's a take apart, but there's also take aparts in the human experience, right? If you've gone through the teenage years or you've gone through different areas of consciousness, right? The toddler is not the same thing as the 8-year-old, those types of things. There are major, what you say, breakdowns and breakthroughs. In fact, they talk about how 7 is the age of reason. This is when kids around there begin to understand time, and when you go to sleep and you wake up is a different day, those types of things. So when you look at it that way and you look at mass consciousness, you can say, all right, we're in a take apart stage, but you can say it's a stage of consciousness. And just like folks have in their life, they might have a period which wasn't very fun, but it was very helpful in that they got more clear about who they were. They got boundaries about what they didn't want. They became stronger than they were before, those types of things. That's what's happening in mass consciousness. Now, do you have to be a part of mass consciousness or can you step aside from it? And we would say the answer is neither. It's both. You are a part of mass consciousness. You can't not be a part of it because you're having a human experience. But you can learn how to, and we talked about this earlier today in our broadcast, you can learn how to have dual perspectives, right? Which is what so many of you, most of you that are having a spiritual awakening are really called to learn, which is how do I look at what's happening and also be at peace? How can I look at what's happening and also still feel my joy? How can I look at what's happening and, as you so beautifully put, have my sense of humor, which is how can I have the eyes of what? Source, you could say, the eyes of joy, love, beauty, the greater perspective while also honoring what is. It's being able to hold that and not just hold that in a human way, as in, of course, I'm this age, right? Teenagers get really upset when you say it's just a phase because they're in it and it means everything to them. But as an adult, you know it's just a phase because you've been through it. So how do you honor the phase that they're in, but also hold the perspective that you know it's just a phase? And that comes through active listening and honoring and compassion and also having a sense of humor when things need to get lightened. Those skills are the exact skills for being able to navigate this changing time and also keep your wits about you, is to know that it's a phase, but to also honor the phase that it is. So we'll stop there for just a moment and say, what questions would you like to ask us?
I think, can you do it wrong?
So
Can we do this wrong?
So we're going to say, what do you mean by it?
Spiritual awakening. Can we go through this life and miss our soul's purpose? Can we completely fail at that?
This is a really good question, and this is coming up a lot because, and not just with you, Moon, but with so many folks that are awakening, and there are folks in general are afraid to begin to harness the power of their consciousness because they don't want to do it incorrectly. Well, here's the thing. You've all been harnessing your consciousness, right? There it is. So you have a boat and you have sails on the boat and you're on a piece of water and it's very windy out. Now, whether or not your sails are up or down, and you're turned the boat in a certain direction or not, and you've got your tiller pointed in this direction, the wind is happening, right? The wind is happening. Is your boat been capsized? Are you going backwards? Are you underneath, right? Are you enjoying it, right? So the wind is happening. So consciousness is happening. And this is such an important thing to say, that even in an awakening, you can't mess it up because consciousness is. Now, the difference is right now is that people are waking up and going, hey, wait a minute, I'm on a boat. And oh, I have a tiller here, or I have a wheel. Hey, wait a minute, I have sails. Oh, where am I going? And these questions are starting to come about, right? So the idea that you were on this track, right, that people said do this and you did that, those were the institutions. Well, the track was just an illusion, right? But everybody followed it like little dotted lines right in the water, right? Pushing against the wind, trying so hard to go in a certain direction. And now that it's seen that the lines are an illusion, right? You're still in a boat. There's still the wind, right? And now you're learning how to sail. So we'll start with that. Can you do it wrong? Well, one of the important things to realize is that your soul doesn't have a finish line that you have to cross in a certain way in order to have achieved enlightenment in this lifetime. Not at all. There is no finish line like that at all. Your soul said, there are some things I'd like to explore, right? And then co-created you with you. We've never said that in exactly that way before, but co-created you with you. Here you are, and you have access to your soul, and your soul has access to you, with you, both in relationship with each other. And now, what are you doing? Whatever you want. Whatever you want. And at the end of your life, no matter what you do or don't do, your soul says, awesome, that was great. Want to do it again? Let's try something else. That was great. How'd you do? That was wonderful. Let's do it. Your soul says, that was great. How could your soul say that when, if you look back and you say, what if I do a life where I never listen to my calling? And I just have a hard life the entire life. I just feel like I feel like I missed the boat, right? Haha. When you get to the end, it doesn't matter. In that, you reemerge with your soul and you don't feel the same sense of separation or agony that you feel or can feel as a human. So to look at the end result and put your human construct onto it, right? Oh, wait a minute. So none of this matters? Well, it all matters. Whether you're heading in the direction you want to go or you heading in the direction that you don't want to go, it all matters. Why? Because every single thing that you do creates, we call them energetic weaves. You're weaving energy and ideas together, and every single thing that you do adds to the weave of source, to the weave of this universe. And even what you would say was a wrong turn is never wrong in creation, because so if Alora would sit here and tell you a story, here's how I did everything wrong for 5 years, right? Would you look at her and say, well, that's it. You're done. You did too many wrong things, right? Right? Or would you say, well, I got a lot out of that story. Oh no, I shouldn't be gleaning positive results by listening to her horrible story, right? Well, Alora, is she allowed? Is she allowed to have positive results from that horrible story? There are always positive results. There are always positive results from every story, from a positive story or from a story that wasn't pleasant to go through. Just like when you read an autobiography and you see the struggle and you learn from it, Source, first of all, doesn't struggle, but Source is the culmination of everything. So then you say, well, none of this matters. And then we go back to, this is that dual perspective. It's like saying to the teenager, it's a phase, it doesn't matter. Of course it matters. Your life is a phase, and it very much matters. Why? Because you're in it. But you also have a greater perspective, which says you can't get it wrong and it's okay. Now, we will say, but Halae, what if I'm not happy? Isn't that getting it wrong? We'll say, well, if your goal is happiness and you don't feel happy and you are not listening to your intuition, or you're not letting yourself listen to your intuition, or you're not learning how to listen to your intuition, right? If you are, you might say, well, I'm afraid to open up because what if my life, changes? Well, if you don't like it, don't you want it to change? Yes, but I don't want it to change that much. Okay, let's go back to the beginning and say this. The only thing that's right or wrong is a label that your brain is putting on an experience. That's it. But here's where do the labels come from? Well, they either come from an outside goal. You were talking about this with Alora. Go to school, right? You get your grade, whatever, and you go, right? So their label of right and wrong, or you do it to yourself. Why do you do it to yourself? Because you perhaps, but most of you listening to this grew up in a system, right? Where everything was labeled right or wrong. Well, what if you were born on this planet as you, and there was no right or wrong system? Everything was experience. It wouldn't occur to you to label something as good or bad. What would you think about your life then?
Be completely different.
Yes.
I can't even fathom what I would think. It certainly feels a lot lighter and freer and a lot happier than the construct that we've been trained to thinking into.
You would think, I didn't like that, I'm going to do it differently. I did like that, I'm going to do more of that. I didn't like that, I'd like to do it differently. I did like that, and it would come from this sense of I. It would come from this sense of self and knowing self. So one of the things that we talk about, and it's important to bring this up with the emerging world stuff, because this is a major thing. The emerging world is about harmony, which means different notes working together. Okay? Can't have the same note and have harmony, different notes working together, which means that as time goes on, there will be more of a greater, it's not even acceptance, it's just of courseness to people expressing themselves as they are and it all working out, right? Versus everything, right? People having to get into groups, right? And group themselves in that way. But the hurdle that has to get over, so to speak, for this to happen is the highest good principle must be more anchored into this, we call earth a dimension, this earth dimension. The highest good has to come back to play. The highest good means if it is in my highest good, it is in the highest good of everyone. There's a story that's not ours or Alora's, but we're going to share it because it's so wonderful that somebody had talked about that they were at a conference and they were supposed to have lunch with somebody that they hadn't seen during one of the breaks. They hadn't seen in a long, long, long time, and that was the only time they could get together. But when the lunchtime came, they were like, I just can't go. I'm just tired. I'm not tired enough, though, to warrant not going, and I feel so guilty, but I'm tired enough. Oh, I'm so conflicted, but I just can't go, but I could. Finally, they just said, listen, I'm so sorry, but I'm going to cancel lunch. Why? Because that person believed in the highest good. They said, I don't want, there's something telling me not to go. I believe in the highest good. I know that this person I'm supposed to see for lunch is going to be incredibly disappointed, but I have to know what I know. So, person who didn't have the lunch, right, was very disappointed that they weren't going to see their friend. But they went down to lunch anyway, to the place where everybody gathered at the conference. And they said, well, I'm gonna have to eat anyway. Let me look for a place to sit. I guess I'll sit over here. And they sat down at a table next to somebody and met their wife, the woman who would be their wife. So it doesn't always look so miraculous, except it is always that miraculous. It is always that miraculous. And that's the fun part of when you get back into non-physical. You see how every single thing is miraculous like that. But that's a wonderful story. And so when you learn about the highest good, you think, well, I don't trust the highest good. I can't tell if my intuition is telling me not to do this thing or I'm just feeling lazy or tired. And the way around that is tried and true. And we'll jokingly say boring. It's called practice. You practice. You say, I think, we recommend highly notebook and a piece of paper. I think it's in my highest good to do this, to cancel this, or to do that. I'm going to write it down and say, and I'm going to, and then I'm going to see how it plays out. And you start doing that enough, right? Now, we will say that one of the pitfalls of beginning the practice of letting in the highest good is the desire to try and figure out why and to know about somebody else. Well, it's in their highest good because I know that they, right? Pull that aside and say, okay, there's that. We call it throat talking. I go, all right, I don't really know. I have a sense that well, you know what? It's none of my business. It's not, and this is very helpful. It's none of my business why it's in the highest good for them. I know it's in the highest good for me. Therefore, there's something, the butterfly effect, whatever it is, there's something about this, right? And it might be 10 degrees away and I can't even see it. There's something about this that's in the highest good. And so let's practice. Let's practice this.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I love just letting go of the responsibility of getting it all figured out. Because we as a human entity, as a human community, have never gone through what we're going through right now.
That's correct.
It's so unknown. So there is no way that we could ever know truly what the steps to the highest good are. And you referred to the earth as a dimension. For those that are listening, there's talk of the third dimension, the fourth dimension, the fifth dimension, and that we're rising through or expanding them. Can explain what that is? What is the difference between 3D, 4D, 5D?
Well, we're agreeing with you that there's lots of different words for that. Alora was talking about her Kira Pachianti, who talks about the shift from the fourth world to the fifth world, and people say the third dimension to the fourth dimension. And we'll say it like this, that if those words and thinking about it that way excites you or interests you or feels comforting to you, great. If thinking about shifting dimensions feels like a big task or like, what if I get it wrong? Or what if I fall off the edge like a video game? Then don't think about it that way. Think about it like this. If you've ever had a moment where you were standing in nature and you're just hanging out, maybe having a walk, could be with others, could be by yourself, but then something happened and all of a sudden everything just looked more rich and vibrant and you could smell every flower and you just felt the poignancy of the air and the clouds, and it was something about that moment was just more than it was before. That's what it is. This dimension, right, is there's all sorts of things. There's planets and there's this and there's that and there's doorways and there's star friends and blah, 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 blah. But what we say is we help souls connect to their people and we help people connect to their souls, right? So we will narrow it down to this for the sake of this conversation. And it goes like this. It's the right time for there to be way more of those poignant moments. And when more and more and more of those poignant moments happen, they become natural and normal. And that elevates the entire human experience. And then what happens? Well, because that's normal, then eventually, right, the same thing happens again. It becomes more poignant than it was, right? More, right? So, but more and more of these moments are happening, right? These shiver moments, these, oh my gosh, right? These deja vu. People have all sorts of words for it. Synchronicity, intuition. It's becoming more apparent. Why? Because that energy, you could say the veil between what was and what is thinner, right? You could say the time is ripe. You could say the doorways are open. You could say the earth grid is shifting. All of those things, all of those words work when you think about it in that way. And it goes like this. Oh my gosh, we're ripe for poignancy? Yes. We're ripe for more richness of experience? Yes. We're ripe for being able to hold on to our human selves, like having, right, thought and mind and, right, and the senses, the five senses, and have a sense of this other sense, but this other sense becomes so real, it doesn't feel like an extra sense. It becomes like one of the senses. Yes, it's just like that. And so humanity, we talk about how the internet and technology, right, is the precursor to becoming telepathic again, because humans have been through different iterations. And people have said, I wish I could talk to my friend over in so and so such and such place. And I wish I could talk. I wish I didn't have to write a letter. I wish it was faster. I wish I just knew if they were okay. I wish. And because, right, so the technology came in to say, well, here you go, right? But now, see, because it piggybacks on each other. Because the desire to be telepathic brought in the technology, now, especially the younger generations, it doesn't occur to them that they can't talk to somebody across the world like that. Get on the Google Earth and go see what's happening. Literally zoom down with a satellite and see what's happening. So telepathy, right? Even if you don't use that word, but being more telepathic, being more in the know is natural to them, whereas it's still this newfangled thing to the older generations, right? I remember when we had to send letters, right? Like Alora Straddles, she grew up, no technology, got her first computer heading into college, so she knows what it was like before and is. And then people say, oh, these kids have too much technology. And it's like, oh, says who, right? Says who? It goes back down to the core of everything, which is, who are you? Do you know? Are you in love with yourself? Are you in love with life? Are you making choices that are great for you? Are you using the dishwasher or washing the dishes by hand? So are you using the iPad or not? Right? If you take away the stuff and you say, what's happening with consciousness, right? And then you say, wait a minute, one of the things that's happening is, and we've never said this, so it'll be fun for Alora to hear it. It's not a mistake that she got a degree in education, because the way that education was set up, well, there was none of this internet and telepathy stuff, right? And now that there is, oh my gosh, well, if you had this and then you were creating educational systems, how would you create them with what you have now? See the difference? And so again, with a remodel, it's like, I'm not building the house from scratch. I'm already living in a house, but I have to remodel. And while there's, pardon my dust, right? There's this remodeling that's happening. And while it's happening, it is just like a remodel causes stress to the nervous system, causes stress to routines, causes stress to especially decision fatigue. If you don't know how you make decisions and why you're making them, and then it can cause the feeling of, which we like to help the spiritual folks out with, which is feeling burdened with responsibility. It's like, you're spiritually awakened, which is fun and wonderful, and you're pumping energy and you're consciously playing with it, right? But everybody's energy. The question is, are they playing with it or not, right? And so when you realize, you go, wait a minute, the burden of this emerging world is not on me. It's like, well, we don't like to call it a burden. We like to say this. Some of you are really good kitchen designers, and some of you are really good architects, and some of you are really good plumbers, and some of you are really good stove installers, and some of you are, so if there's a remodel happening and somebody says, I need help, right? And you like doing it and it's fun and you don't have the whole who's paying me how much and blah, blah, blah wrapped up in it, and you think, what a fun project, and you want to jump in there, you're jumping in there, right? If you're not doing it out of guilt, you're jumping in there because you go, I don't know what it is, but I'm really good with color. So let me help you with the color scheme. Figure out, I don't know. Look, I really love figuring out how to make the electrical wires work really, really well. And so let me design your boxes and your thing. Oh, I'm so good at landscaping. And so think about it that way. Those of you that are inspired into this remodel have your specific interests and loves and skills that come from your lifetime now, lifetimes other lifetimes. There is no time, right? All these things. And you're in here, what? To play. You're in here to play.
I love hearing that. It seems like the difference between the world that we have one foot in and the world that we're stepping metaphorically into, the difference is one is a doing and one is a being. And this one we create for an objective and an outcome. And in the more expansive one, just the act of creation itself is like the wind that pushes that ship along.
Yes.
It's just creation. We are here to just create. So if somebody wants to have more fun, because it, like those moments that you were talking about, Halae, about, oh, this feels good and everything's just richer and it's brighter. And the more you have those moments, the more you want those moments. And it completely shifts how you see possibility in your perspective in life. And what if those around you, because this is what happens quite often, aren't on the same path? How there's so much frustration and confusion about how do I stay in my 3D obligations and world and still expand into the new earth? How do I navigate both those waters?
That's a very good question. And we're gonna talk about stamina. Okay. So sometimes folks don't want to look at, back in the day when they had magazines, they don't want to look at a magazine that shows how they could do their living room. Right? They don't want to look at new color schemes. They don't want to, we're going to take this remodel analogy further. They don't even want to look at what's possible in the furniture stores, because then they have to look around at their living room as it is. And maybe they don't like it. Maybe they just have all this furniture other people gave them that they don't like. And, right? And then maybe they see their clutter or whatever, and they don't want to have to go through the work, right? So they stop themselves before they even dream, okay? Because they are afraid to see the difference between what could be and what is. So one of the things that Alora brings, and this is what improv has helped her with, and we're not saying you all have to do improv, but we're saying, she's don't be afraid of ideas, right? Don't be afraid of ideas. They're just ideas. We don't have to change the living room. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of the idea. I think I want to write a book. Great. We'll go play with that idea. Well, because if you really feel called to write it, and it is the time to write it, you will be filled with the energy, the inspiration, the drive, the help to do it. You won't be exhausted by it. You will want to. So you've been trained, most humans, especially in the Western world, have been trained to do things while they are not called to do them, to fight through the exhaustion, to stay up late and write that paper and do, right? And so they immediately assume, right, without meaning to, that projects, right, will have that element in them. But inspired projects, while some of the moments might be difficult, they're so driven that those hard moments are challenges, not awful things. They're things to conquer. See, the language changes, yes? So number one, don't be afraid of ideas. And so let's go back to people around me are still stuck in, right? Alora calls it water cooler talk, right? They bond by talking about what's terrible, right? So when you're in your own remodel of relationships, right? The first thing is the grief. I realize that I have been water cooler talking my whole life, and it's very painful, and I want to step out of it. But I don't have anything new anchoring me in yet. I don't even know how to talk positive. I don't know how to talk positive to myself. I don't have a community around me that's positive. So right now I'm seeing what I want and I don't have it. Now I don't have anything. I used to be able to at least feel slightly bonded at the water cooler, although felt negative, right? But hey, we're all in this together. Now I show up at the water cooler. I feel different than everybody. I feel pain when they do the water cooler talk, and I've got nowhere to go. And we say, great, well, how long do you want to stay in that position? Because you can't go back to the way you were before you knew about the water cooler at all. You cannot unknow what you now know. And the sooner you accept that, the sooner you'll move on. You say, well, oops, I stepped in a pool of awakening. Crap. All right. Better get on with my training. Oh, gosh darn it. I had an epiphany. Well, shoot. All right. move forward. And so the question then is, all right, where can I talk more openly about what I'm going through? Where can I hear things, podcasts like this? Where can I, right, just put it in the background while I'm making dinner so that I just feel like I'm not alone? Where can I learn the skills? Get on it, get on it, get on it, get on it, get on it. So, wow, I'm not inspired. All right. Well, then what? What do you need to be inspired? You haven't had enough pain about it. You haven't reached the place where you believe it's possible. You won't let yourself shift, right? This is where a person learns, and we're serious about this. Phone a friend and have somebody put some spelunking gear on you and tie a rope to you to help you as you go down into some dark thoughts about this. Why won't I let this happen? Why? Because a skilled person or a friend who can hold the light while they let you spelunk, going into the cave, going down in there to dig through stuff, will say, all right, enough wallowing, come back up. This is a skill. This is also for grief, to really let yourself grieve, to really let yourself go into to poke around in these places that hurt enough that you can find the kernel, but not so long that you get stuck in them, right? And you can learn that skill, but if you don't have it, you get help. Say, all right, I need to go spelunk. I need to go find out why I won't let myself get away from this water cooler. Who's going to help me? And there are so many programs and things to help you. So for those of you who are really stuck in this, we urge you to re-listen to what we just said, get out a piece of paper, write down these steps, and then circle on it. Where am I? What do I need to do? And it all starts with a decision point, the intent. I don't know what I don't know. I'm stuck, but I want to get unstuck. I need help. And then start to pay attention. And we're very serious when we say, pay attention to what irritates the heck out of you. Because when a friend phones you up and says, we need to go to lunch, and you're like, leave me alone, right? You might find that the things that are calling you in that moment are very irritating. So listen and say, underneath the irritation, is there a nudge for me? Is there a nudge for me? And if there is, then admit it. I am angry about you taking me out to lunch because you're going to make me talk about the things I don't want to talk. Fine, I'm going to go. Why? Because I've asked for shift. And in order for shift to happen, I have to show up for it.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you a maybe a little bit harder question. There is so much evidence that we are, some say currently, irrevocably in the sixth extinction of humanity. And some, such as myself, believe that we can shift our way out of that. What is your perspective?
Well, we're in agreement with you, right? So this extinction of humanity, absolutely not, right? Now, the shifting, right? We're going to go back to the individual thing because this is so important. What is harmony again? It's individual nodes that are working together, okay? Now, this is the balancing act between what's humanity doing and what am I doing? What's humanity doing and what am I doing? What's humanity doing and what am I doing? So you want to acknowledge what humanity is doing because you're part of humanity, right? And it's helpful to know, hey, the road is closed. Maybe don't go that way, right? So do not pay attention to what, the map's telling you or those types of things. But then to step back and say, what do I know about my journey? Right? For those of you that are having a spiritual awakening, right? To step back and say, do I feel that I can listen enough to what I feel called to do, that I can step out of my comfort zone enough to do what I feel called to do, right? And most importantly, can I get rid of the BS, pardon our, right, that it has to be big? Because we are telling you one phone call to a friend and just say, I'm leaving you a voicemail, I've been thinking about you. You're going to be so delighted, right, at the end of all of this to look back and say, wow, there are things that you are turning left in the grocery aisle instead of right, and you walk by somebody, you cannot even know, right? Packets of information are getting passed on from one person to another epiphanies are happening, changes are happening here and there. It is layers upon layers upon layers upon layers upon layers of fantastic, amazing synchronicity, of subtleties that the humans have no idea about yet, right? And will be a very, very long time before they even get close to even knowing about it in this place, this earth dimension. And so to go back and say, is there an extinction happening? No. Or is there a shift happening? Yes. What do I do about it? And it's like, do you release this idea that you have to do something important? Because if you can let that go, now you can live. And when you live, do you realize that your life is the most magnificent, amazing thing? Do you realize there's this person, some person, right? Alora had talked about it before, not here, but in a different place. They made a playlist on a streaming service that she listens to music. She doesn't know this person and they don't know her. But virtually just about every of the myriads of songs on there, she says, it's as if I made this playlist for myself, but I didn't have to go through the work. She'll never meet this person and they'll never meet her. But when she plays that as she's making dinner, she doesn't feel alone. She feels like there's somebody out there that made a playlist that I liked. Again, they'll never meet each other. So there are things that you have done, and we're talking about you accidentally left a piece of trash at the park, and you later on think, oh no, there are things that you have done that have created amazing connections, amazing healing, and amazing things. Even the things that you think you messed up, all roads lead to source. All things are wonderful. So to go back and say, I'm frightened about what's happening. So there are things in the world that are definitely going through the take apart. And there are things that are, well, and seems like things are out of control and all sorts of things. And it goes back to this, and we mean this, to say, all right, do I know how to listen to my intuition? Because if I don't, well, what do I do about that? Well, well, if I can't hear what I'm being called to do, right? It's not that nothing matters, but we might as well do whatever because, all right, okay, all right. I got to hear my intuition. Well, is my intuition telling me, and this is really helpful, should I move? Should I change the big stuff, right? Do I need to move? Am I in the wrong place? Do I need to get to higher ground, right? Do I need to store food, right? All these things. People are saying to Alora, are you doing X, Y, or Z? And she says, I will if I feel called. That is something we taught her. Because she says, logically, I should be doing this, but I just don't feel it. I will if I feel called. And so go ahead and write down on a piece of paper all the big things you think you should be doing. And then say, do I feel called? Do I feel called? Okay, well, if I don't feel called to any of that, now what? And navigate from there. Because the idea that there is this big thing happening and a person is having a spiritual awakening, usually, not always, but usually takes that person and puts them in a state of we're gonna use a trigger word here, compliance to the spiritual awakening. I must comply to the spiritual awakening. I must do what the spiritual awakening is calling me to do. But that is the energy of the old world, yes? And when you realize, I go, oh, wait a minute, the whole thing is about, right? It's not about not complying. It's about taking that whole word out of there, that whole concept out of there and saying, wait a minute, there's a spiritual awakening. Now, if you go really broad and say, there is no time, there is no distance, there is no, right? There's no death as in the ending of things. There's only energy and there's experiences and there's this earth dimension. Okay, great. And this earth dimension, well, the earth is great, but humanity is going through a shift. That is true. Okay, great. Now what? Well, am I somebody who is interested in that? Like, am I an architect who says there's a house being rebuilt? Am I a plumber who says, hey, there's something to plumb over here? Am I a painter who says something? Am I interested in the Great Awakening? Because if I am, great, go play with it. And honestly, if you're not, and we mean this, if you're like, you know what, there's a Great Awakening, but I really don't care. I think I should care, but I don't think 2 more seconds about it. Say, yeah, there's something going on out there. Not for me. I'm interested in something else and go do that. Why? Because when you realize that everything is energy and everything is source, you realize the people paying attention to the awakening are not greater than the people who are not. Everything is great.
That's amazing. And you mentioned something I want to wrap back to. You're like packets of information being passed from person to person.
Yes.
Tell me more about that.
Well, so you and Alora sat down before this thing happened, and you're both and she's like, the password's not working, and she was laughing because she could tell. She was like, something's up at the beginning of this, and then you sort of sat, you chit chatted. In that, before you even got on the Zoom together, the two of you had said, all right, we're going to have this conversation, and you two exchanged incredible amounts of information one to the other because you two have known each other before. And you've got experience and she's got experience, and you sort of did a catch up, right? Now, that happens even with souls that don't know each other. Why? Because you're all generous. Source is very generous. So maybe you're driving down the street and you feel the urge to go this way, then that way, right? And some bicycle, or you're driving the car and some bicycle comes by and you notice it. You go, huh, right? Maybe the brain says, right, depending on your mood, they were too close to the car. Great mood. Hey, I like the color of their shirt. Right, but something about it, you noticed it, right? Sort of an energetic notice. So what happened? Well, maybe you've never had lifetimes before, but in this example, you did not have lifetimes before, but you figured out something and they were looking for a solution. And they drove and you were like, ah, and then you passed on an energy packet and they were like, thank you. And they went home that night and had an epiphany. Where do those epiphanies come from? When you have an awakening or a shift, or you wake up and you go, I just feel better. Yes, it's happening with humans moving about. It's happening in the dream time. And of course, energy exists. You don't have to be in the same place. You could, send things all over the planet. Animals could be speaking you all over the planet. But there is this really fun part of the human experience, being in this physical place with gravity and time. And that's why you're here, this playground. And in that, when the opportunity arises and you can be in a place at the right time, right? Just because you do it. If you're open to it, now that we've mentioned it, you say, let me do more of that. And you go, great. And then you go, well, I feel like going to this coffee shop instead of that coffee shop. Why? Who knows? So just go. Notice what you know, flow in the flow, and realize that you are all giving and receiving at all times. Ultimately, you all know everything because just like us, you're all a part of source. But as you layer down into what can you see from here, sort of like, right? You're on a cruise ship, you're looking out through your window, what can you see from here? But ultimately, you are everything, right? Right? So it's like that. It's very fun when you think about it. Now, we will say, for those of you that are very sensitive and think, oh no, I can't open myself up to packets because I can't even go into the crystal store without feeling like there's dark energy when somebody walks by and they're in a bad mood. We say, all right, let's go back to, we're going to talk about this for a moment because this is also something that stops people from having the spiritual awakening, and it goes like this. The mental focus that Alora talked about in terms of law of attraction, Alora used to see ghosts everywhere. And we'd say those are like, some of them are visitors, some of them are energetic, telepathic things, some of them are energy pockets, the whole bit. But she used to see them. It's just scare her all the time. And she says, I gotta stop seeing this. This is not helpful, and I don't want to be a ghostbuster. I'm not called to that. But when she opened herself up psychically, she just didn't have any discernment. She says, all right, bring it all on. And she was so into it. She said, great. And there it was. And so the law of attraction stuff said, listen, if you're going to go to a party, she would imagine a bridge. The bridge is my intent. I want to go to the party, and my intent is to feel good at the party and to come home feeling happy that I went. And she would practice that energy so that when she went, that's what she was noticing. And it is just like, we would say selective hearing, but we would mostly say focus. If you're really focused and you're in a coffee shop, you won't hear the ambient noise around you. You're paying attention to the conversation or what's happening. Now, based on, right, how loud everything is and how you're feeling, you have more capacity for that. But what makes everything else loud? And this is something we've never said to Alora, and we're going to put here too. What makes everything else loud is how important you think it is. If you grew up thinking, you better be aware, you better make sure you don't get snuck up on, you better make sure, right, that you got all eyes on all things, you got to make sure, right, then you have over awareness of environmental factors for safety reasons. And that is exactly why when Alora blew her sight open, she saw more than she was called to see, because she had this wired this from her childhood that she had to be like, eyes all around, right? Once she realized that she didn't have to have that and she could choose, she had to practice, right? She'd do the, jokingly say, the boring part of practicing that, hey, I'm allowed to do this and I am not only as safe, I realize I'm always safe. Safety isn't even a factor. Oh, wait a minute. I was putting safety as a factor in there, right? And now I can do it. So that's another thing to navigate. Now you go back to where Alora said, give yourself 2 years to have to the beginnings of an awakening. We haven't even spoken an hour. Think about all we have laid out here, right? We've dumped out. We'll even say, well, open the bag, right? Look at all of these skills, right? Oh my gosh, there's so many of them. What do I do about that? Well, you say this. Number one, I'm going to set the intent that the most important skill for me to learn next is easy and it's present and it's available to me. And then after that, what's the next step? That's easy and present and available to me. And what's the next step? And then let go of your expectations of how it has to come to you, because you might feel called to turn on a TV show, one of those Lego TV shows, and watch some kid show and not realize that the analogy in that show, or just watching something that was sort of childlike, completely cracks you open, puts it back together, and gives you an epiphany. And so the guides don't just talk in, crystals and birds and eagles and hawks. Everything around you is a potential opening for you, is a potential shift for you. All of the things. And when you let that be fun and you say, all right, surprise me with your whimsy, universe, it becomes so much easier. Then we go back to what you said about the awakening. There is an awakening. And we, as you know, we work with Alora a lot, right? She's human too, right? But we would say to her, to all of you, right? Are you putting too much pressure on this awakening? Just like if you said to a teenager, you better get it right. Because if you don't get this right, the rest of it, no, right? It is an important time and it is a shift, but put it back in perspective and say, oh, it's one of the shifts. It's one of the awakenings. It is a great one, but it's one of the awakenings. And as we go through it, we're going to go through it as we go through it. And then what? We will always have help. We can always remodel. We can always shift to take the pressure off of getting this correct. Now, as soon as you take the pressure off, getting it right, it's easier to do it more in rightness with who each one of you is.
I love that. I love that. I think we have time for 2 final questions.
Yes.
And how do people call in their guides? I believe that we all have them.
Yes, you all have them. We've talked about this, and we'll put this out here. This is important. You all have your soul, and you all have your birth guides. So guides who say, we're going to be with this person for their whole life, like the team called the birth team. And then you also have guides that, like friendships, they come and go, right? For certain periods, they're always available, but they're there for intense periods of time. You also have specific guides for tasks, right? So say somebody's a mechanic and they said, I want to be a really great mechanic. And they said, great. They may end up with a guide who's a specific guide for that task. So task-based. And then you've got folks like us who come in and do greater stuff. So how do you call in the guides? One of the challenges of calling in the guides is personality. It's this idea of what are their names? What do they look like? What is their personality? And the challenge is that, yes, you will invariably assume some human characteristics to the guides. Why? Because you're human perspective right now, and you have to be able to receive information from us, any guide, in a way that you can perceive in your human form. So you can't perceive it in a way that's so outside of the human perception because you're human. So accept the fact, okay, great, I'm gonna personify this in a way that's sort of like give it a personality, but I only want to do it enough. So people say to Alora, what are my guides' names? And most often the answer is irrelevant. It's irrelevant. And once in a while she'll say, yes, it's good to have a name assigned. So here's the thing. We are not Halae, except we are Halae. Alora says, we need something to call you. We said, great. And then it's fun. She fought with us about it for quite some time. She fought with us. I don't like the name. So you want us to call it, you should call you, what, Herbert? Like, what kind of name you want? I said, well, what is it? And we said, well, Halae is a sound that in some other languages means home. And we like that. And then finally we just said, get over it. We've picked it. But then it was like, what do I call it? How do I spell it? And we went back and forth. And so it was this funny thing. And to this day, Alora thinks, well, gosh, if I wasn't so blocked, would we have a different name? And we laugh and we say, no, the block was you. So this struggle about naming guides, really, it's all on the humans. It's all on you, right? We don't care. We don't need them. We don't use them. But if it helps you to have a name for us and say, hey, can we work together to come up with a name that meets that in-between space between me and you? Because now we've never said it that way, but now Alora goes, oh, right. Alora, us. Oh, yes, Halae is an interpretation of that energy between them and here. Yes. So how can you tune in your guides? Alora read a book that said years and years ago, this is in the 1990s at some point, if you want to have a relationship with your guides, just every day say, I'm ready to have a relationship with my spirit guides. So in a very ceremonial way, she'd be brushing her teeth and getting ready for her day job. I'd like to have a relationship with my spirit guide. And she just said it every day. And then one day she was doing the dishes and she heard a voice and it was behind her. And it didn't sound like her, and it came to her. And she knew enough about psychology to say, like, is this my ego? Is this my id? What is this? The most important thing was she didn't say, go away. She said, what is that? So if you are hearing things or seeing things, if you simply begin by saying, what is that? And leave it at that, you'll be well on your way to getting to know them more and more and more. Realizing, of course, that you're going to put human stuff on them. They don't care. They're happy with it. But that the goal with that is that there's a way that they and you can meet in the middle. Why? So that you can communicate. The goal is that you can communicate. The goal is that you can communicate. Now, some of you, Alora is very visual. Very, very visual. You say apple, she sees an apple, she sees it in full color, she sees it as if it was in the grocery store. Some folks are not. Some folks see nothing. Some folks see a drawing, right? Alora was shocked to realize this. Not everybody sees it because everybody has different skill sets in different ways. So when she interprets energy, she sees all sorts of things. Now, other folks are more physical or in other ways. So here's the thing. You must understand that how you are in life is also how you translate. So if you're not a visual person and you think, I don't see my guides, of course you don't. But how do you know them? That's the question. And maybe it's through writing. Maybe it's through music. Maybe it's through meditation. Maybe it's through song. Maybe it's through dance. Maybe it's through playing a sport. Maybe it's by having an epiphany while you're trimming the bushes out front, right? You are you, and that doesn't change just because you've decided that you want to, quote unquote, hear guides. Now, invariably, so many folks who teach about guides see or sense guides in certain ways. Why? Because those types of folks are drawn to talking about them, teaching about them, writing them. Yes? So you'll have that person who lives in the woods who's so connected, but they don't feel called to blog about it, right? Release yourself from having to look like any teacher and instead say, how I move through life is also how my guides will reach me. Why? Why not?
It's easy the way you describe it. I like that.
It's deceptively easy because it gets complicated because the human thinks it needs to be more than it is. And they want to get it right. And they don't want to be wrong. And they can't prove it. They can't say, look, did you see that too? And so that's where the practice comes in. I'm writing it down and I'm looking at it and I'm deciding for myself if it's true or not. Because once I know that it's true, it doesn't matter what. And somebody said to Alora, how am I going to know if I meet my soulmate? And she says, because you're not going to call me and ask them if they're the one. You're going to know. You're going to know those types of things. And when you get to the place, now it takes time and it takes time with each one of you, but in a different way. But when, as Alora had said in the beginning, I've reached this place where I know that my intuition I consider myself an expert in it. And we would say, we agree with that. Why? Because she knows what she knows. And she doesn't need anybody else to know what she knows. Now, that doesn't mean that she doesn't struggle sometimes trying to communicate and have relationships and, right, live stuff. But nobody can say to her, right, you're not intuitive, except hear us now, every single one of you. Just recently, she went through another crisis of consciousness where she's like, I think I'm making all this up. And then she's like, wait a minute, I know what this is. I'm being called to more than I am now, and I'm afraid. And we said, yep. And then it went away. Yeah, that was it. Then she says, I see it. Yeah, I see it. I see it. Right?
That's a beautiful segue into my last question. Halae, how do you describe God?
So remember what we said, and it's a phenomenal question at this time as well, because remember what we said, humans are gonna have to personify guides in a certain way because you have to be able to translate it enough from your human form. So here comes the source, creator, God, right? Same thing, right? You're gonna, Alora's getting shivers, right? You're gonna have to personify it enough that you can understand it. Now, the question is, are you using somebody else's personification of it or are you using yours? And when you ask yourself that question, it makes all the difference. Now, for those of you who say, what is this word personification? It's the idea when you take all your stuffed animals and they have personalities and names and things, you take, right, what looks to be an inanimate object, right, and you put a personality upon it, right? When you realize that you're going to have to translate through the human experience, and there's nothing wrong with that. You're not doing it wrong. You're not limited. You're not on the wrong level of dimension. You are this human perceiving, right, on purpose in this beautiful place. You say, okay, there's probably gonna maybe, I just accept that there might be some personification of God. And let me stop being mad at everybody else for me not realizing I could do it myself. Okay, all right. Because even when Alora says source, right, and it doesn't have a face, and it doesn't have a name, it doesn't have a beard, right? It's just source. Even when she says source, she hears not quite a voice, but something like a voice. And we would say, even that is only there because you are doing your best to tune into that through your human experience. And then she's like, oh. And then we're like, yeah, but there's nothing, that's not broken. You don't need to fix that, right? So there are lots of ways to talk about it. Alora knows a bunch of little kids and things like that. And to one of them, she calls it the big love because she knows they're a feeler. They can feel. She says, you know, that big love that just feels so big, it's everywhere. So you can find funny ways and beautiful ways to source, creator, all that is, the everything, the great big laugh. whatever it is you want to call it. You'll find ways to talk about it because, the force, right? The things that connects all of the things. But keep in mind, if it ever starts to feel uncomfortable to you, there's two things. There's more, but invariably there's two things going on. One is I'm afraid of my own power, or two, I'm pissed off that my version of this has somebody else's idea of what it is in it, and I don't like their idea. I want to fight against the way they colored in the lines on this. You say, all right, well, one, okay, I have power. Let's just accept that. And two, what do I think about source now? When I just release a little bit and I meditate just a little bit, what's the next version of a metaphor that works for me? And let it unfold. And when you feel it enough, you go, all right, here I am. And here it is, right? And the question is, am I oriented enough? Like, am I facing in enough of the right direction for me that my life is okay right now, right? Right? Is there any big thing that needs to change? Oh, no, you really better move. Or, all right, okay, I'm good right now. Like, Alora says, all right, I'm where I need to live. Everything's good. Okay, great. Is there anything really loud that I'm forgetting to do or should be doing? No. Okay, so then everything else right now is little stuff. Well, why am I worrying about the little stuff? Right? Clear it out. Now, if you're in this place where you're like, no, there is something really big I need to change. Again, why are you worrying about the little stuff? Because there's something big that needs to change, right? You see where we're going with this. All the little stuff, right? Right? When it comes to now it matters if you're filling out your tax form, you want to make sure you dot the I or right. But we're not talking about like filling out paperwork, and we're not talking about making sure you do the steps. So if I put the groceries in the cart, and then I paid for them and I put them back we're talking about consciousness. When it comes to consciousness and when it comes to your intuition, say, wait a minute, in this paradigm and in this way, the little stuff, it just disappears. Because what matters always is the big stuff. And if I've got the big stuff taken care of enough, it's gone. See, the little stuff isn't even there. And we're touching on this because we present energy along with information. Did you feel that? That's the absence of stress. That is the absence of stress. We're not even going to call it peace. We're going to let you put whatever words you all want to put on it. But you feel that? That's part of the energy of this beautiful emerging world that is emerging.
What a beautiful way to wrap this up.
So it is, yes.
Beautiful shifting conversation, and thank you for coming in and sharing your wisdom and your love with all of us. I appreciate you, Halae. And so is Alora going to come back?
Yeah, if you want, I'll pop back in. Thank you, Halae. Yeah.
Oh, you guys are so delightful. You have such a cute relationship.
Yeah. Yes, I can say yes, we do. Right? Yeah. It's been, like I said, it's been a road for me to practice it and to trust it and to get to know it. I think just like in any relationship, but at this point now, I'm like, I can definitely say yes.
Yeah. You guys, it's a beautiful friendship, and it's inspiring for me as well, as I think it is for the entire audience. And so I honor your time, I honor your heart and your passion, and I'm so proud of you for stepping through and breaking through that and just going, oh, I'm just afraid. We're all out here afraid at some point, right? And there's really nothing to be afraid of.
Well, that fear place happened because I'd forgotten that we were doing this podcast. And then when I remembered that we were doing it, that I had a crisis of consciousness, and the guides were like, get in there. And so this is that highest good thing. Like this what you're bringing here, Moon, and what folks that are listening to this is bringing, like, as we're going through all of this, the guys are like saying, to cap this up and to say, we're all a part of each other's healing, and we're all a part of each other's joy, and we're all a part of each other's expansion, whether we know it or not. And if we can just lean in to our own uncomfortability enough, right, to find what is, and practice what's an intuitive uncomfortable step and what's the not intuitive comfortable step, right? That really is the tipping point for everything that we're sensing that's coming. It's wonderful.
It is. It is. Alora, how can people work with you? Where can they find you? What do you?
That's a good question. So if you want to talk to me, go to askalora.com, ASKALORA.com. If you want to have a session or get the weekly broadcasts with Halae, go to halaeteachings.com. That's HALAE teachings.com.
Beautiful. Thank you, my friend. Have a blessed night.
Yeah, you too.